Hi, I'm DC, your host of Best in Blue, here on the KUDZUKIAN Network. Best in Blue is a collaborative effort formed in partnership with the Memphis Police Department and the KUDZUKIAN Network. We try to bring you the transparent view of the inner workings of the Memphis Police Department and the fine officers who go out every day protecting and serving without fear or favor. The information you'll get here on Best in Blue is the latest and it's unfiltered, folks. Speaking of the latest information on Best in Blue, today we're going to speak with Lieutenant Colonel Beasley, the unit leader of the Crisis Intervention Team. This team is doing life-changing and life-saving work every day. Most of us have witnessed or been intimately involved with persons who found themselves in crisis. Well, our MPD has specially trained officers who make the scene every day to assist with ensuring those family members that their loved one will be met with an officer who attempts to ensure they are handled in the least restrictive manner possible. Lieutenant Colonel Beasley will join us on set to take us through what CIT is, what crisis intervention actually is, how some of the work that they do in the community, how they work with other partners in our community, and finally, how you can ensure that your loved one is responded to when they're in crisis. So for those of you who are new to Best in Blue or KUDZUKIAN, all of our shows can be accessed via podcast from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn app, Stitcher, iHeartMedia, and most other podcast providers. Stick around for Best in Blue here on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Best in Blue for you. Best in Blue. Best in Blue for you. Best in Blue.
Hey, I'm DC, host of Best in Blue, here on the KUDZUKIAN Network, and I'm joined by our friend, Lieutenant Colonel Beasley, the Crisis Intervention Team leader. Welcome to the program, sir. How are you?
I'm fine, sir. Thank you.
Great, great. Tell our viewers what the CIT is, and that's, of course, an acronym for Crisis Intervention Team, what it is and how important it is as a tool within the Memphis Police Department.
The Crisis Intervention Team are a group of specially trained officers who go out and deal with individuals who are in crisis. And when I say crisis, I mean that the officer or the person that we're dealing with are probably at their wits' ends, and their loved ones or caretakers are at their wits' end, and they need someone to come out and help them. And it's very important in the city of Memphis and around the nation because of the number of individuals dealing in crisis and mental illnesses continually growing.
So it's not just a local problem, it's a national issue, but our local department has a specialized team trained to address this particular issue, is what you're saying, Colonel?
It is, yes, it is a national program, the Crisis Intervention Team. Although it did start here in Memphis in 1988, so we're coming up on our 30-year anniversary. Actually, 1987 is when the event occurred that led to the start of the Crisis Intervention Team. And since then, the program is been marketed or been taken up in over 4,000 other law enforcement agencies.
Wow. Well, how many officers do we have trained as CIT officers? And walk us through a little bit of the training component that a crisis intervention team member would perform.
Currently, we have approximately 291 officers who are CIT trained, who are active CIT officers, meaning they actually go out and handle calls. In the training is a 40-hour period, a 40-hour block. The officers, the first day is a kind of slow. They get training on all the different medications and the different diseases and different illnesses that they may face, and what to expect when they come up, when they meet someone who may be suffering from those illnesses. And from there, we go out and the next day we will go out and visit mental health facilities and the VA hospital and places that deal with people who are suffering in crisis. And after that, we start doing a lot of practicums, where the scenarios where our officers are putting different scenarios that the original CIT officers have faced.
Well, let me ask you this question. In terms of the training itself, is it volunteer or is it mandatory?
It's voluntary. We don't force people to come CIT simply because we feel that it takes a special person to deal with somebody who's in crisis or deal with someone who's suffering with a mental illness. So we volunteer. The officers volunteer. And as I've said on many occasions, after polling some of our officers, we found out that about 45% of our CIT officers actually actually have someone in their family who are suffering from crisis or mental illness. So therefore, these guys, they volunteer, these guys and girls, they volunteer, and what they're learning are skills to not only help them do their job better, but they're also learning skills to help them better relate and communicate with their relatives and loved ones.
Wow. Well, let me revisit something again. So you said that the training, the component that you all use, is it a little bit of classroom? Is it real life training skills in the cars or in the community, or do they go to a specific place to get this 40 hours of training?
The 40 hours of training is conducted at the training academy, at the Memphis Police Department Training Academy, for the most part. But we do go out to the different facilities, so the officers will have intervention with those who are suffering from mental illnesses and those who are with crises. So they do go to those places, but for the majority of the training is there at the training academy. When I talked about scenarios, I'm talking about what happens is we have CIT officers who've already gone through the training. Yeah. They will bring back scenarios they had to face while they were doing their actual job, and we will put the trainees in those scenarios and to see how they will react to it. Then we critique them on it, to help them better be able to do their jobs.
Oh, wow. That's why you can get the best information right here on Best in Blue. We'll be right back.
Brought to you by the Memphis Police Department. The Best in Blue. Visit joinmpd.com.
What you gonna play now? Bobby, I don't know. But whatsoever I play, it's got to be funky. 1, 2, 3.
I think we were getting diddly squat. He was going to give us diddly. We got the diddly part, and I think we're working on the squat right now.
And I'm not saying go back and look at what Barack Obama did. Go back and look at what George Bush did. You had National Security Advisor, African-American woman, Secretary of State, African-American man. That was George Bush.
Are we listening, though? Those of us in the African-American, are we listening to you, though? Do you see anywhere in your data where the numbers are going up in terms of black media? Because we see a lot of our black media partners are selling to some of the major corporations in America. Are we making any headway?
Racism and all the things that exist, but it starts by you galvanizing your strength at home. We have to start to trade with each other in all aspects.
And he said something profound, you just have to keep fighting to get those stories. And eventually, you keep advocating for those stories, eventually those stories are going to get told.
That whatever they did it well, sewing and all of those types of service type jobs. They did it with pride. They did it with quality too.
Yeah.
They did it with quality.
Right here on Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. You're going to get your information out of us. It's going to be real, it's going to be right, and it's going to be funky.
Funky politics is on. D.C. and Davenport on the throne. Politics for the young and old. They won't stop till they reach their goal.
I'm honored to be a part of Funky Politics.
Funky politics for me and you. So sit back and enjoy the show. The KUDZUKIAN Network, let's go.
I watch y'all coming here for years, cause you shot somebody. Now your life is shot. Real talk. Don't lose your head, use your head, man. Gun crime, max time.
Live in Memphis? Need assistance. Finding help is easy when you make the right call. Meet John and his family. They are new to the community, but they need help. Are they making the right call? For life-threatening emergencies only, of course, John would call 911. But not for noise complaints or things like loose dogs, vacant lots with weeds, and garbage collection. That's 311. Call 311 when you don't know where to turn for city services. Call 211 for things like home care support, mental health, employment services, community programs, housing and income supports, and so much more. That's 211. Call 211 when you need non-emergency health and human services help. Whether it's 311, 211, or 911. Finding help is easy when you make the right call.
We're back with you with Best in Blue here on the KUDZUKIAN Network. I'm your host, DC, and we're talking to Lieutenant Colonel Beasley. And we're also joined by Assistant Coordinator of the Crisis Intervention Team, Officer Lash. How are you, sir?
Good.
Welcome to the program. And you know what? We want to talk a little bit about how the program and the process is managed with the Memphis Police Department. So Officer Lash and Colonel Beasley, one thing that a lot of our folks have been asking us is when it comes to the CIT, the collaborations with the Shelby County Sheriff's Department, with the DA's office and General Sessions, but there's also another point out there of this group that you all work with. It's called the Alliance Healthcare Services. How does that work, Colonel Beasley?
Alliance Healthcare Services, basically they run the Crisis Assessment Center. And the Crisis Assessment Center is a place where we take individuals who are in crisis. From the Crisis Assessment Center, they decide whether or not the person needs more acute medical training, more acute medical help, or they decide if in fact they need to be transferred somewhere else, or they decide if in fact they can be put back on their medicine, put back out into the population.
So when this person, you make this call for service, there's not an immediate, if there's not immediate need to take this person to Unpopular or what have you, or Jail East, that person is taken to this assessment center, is what you call it.
It is. It's the Crisis Assessment Center, and I hate to say it, but it's almost like a clearinghouse where they decide where the individual needs to go. If the person needs to go to the hospital or needs more acute medical treatment, they'll take them there. If the person can be put back on their medication and be put back out into the public, the general public, they'll do that also. So they decide all at the Crisis Assessment Center. What the CIT officer does is functions as a bridge between that person in crisis and them getting the help.
Well, tell me this: how did this relationship start? The origins of it, and the absolute. You just explained a little bit how the consumer gets that particular assessment. But when did this start? I mean, I guess most of us think that if you make a call for service, you're going to go to one or two places, either the hospital, or you're going to go to jail. So how did the relationship start? I guess what year did it start? How long has it been a part of the tools that you all have with the Memphis Police Department?
Well, first of all, we answered 21,311 calls on last year for individuals who were in crisis, who family members felt like they needed our services. And we realized that, at one time, people thought that if the police came to deal with my loved ones or whatever, or somebody was in crisis, that the police would mistreat them and take them to jail. And we realized that jail is not where the majority of them need to be. As a matter of fact, those who are in crisis and those who are suffering from mental illnesses are more likely to be victims of crime than to be suspects in a criminal act.
Wow.
So we take them to the Crisis Assessment Center to help them get that treatment they need.
Wow. And in talking about this treatment, with the continuation of conflicts abroad, and I can only imagine that we've seen an increase in PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorders, and a lot of the consumers who are former military members who come back to state. And has there been a substantial increase, Officer Lash, in those people that are back integrated into our communities right here in Memphis? Has there been a substantial increase in calls for service with relationship to them?
I would say yes.
Wow.
An exact number I'm not sure of, but yes.
And with those particular calls, our force knows if a family member, I'm assuming, allows us that information. We know that when you make the scene that this is a person that possibly has had some intervention, or had some intervention either with the federal system, with the Veterans Administration, or at some medical facility here in Memphis, I'm assuming, Lieutenant.
Yes. So what we ask of the call takers or the individual placing the calls is we want them to give us as much information they can give us about their loved one or their relatives or whoever it is. We want them to give us as much information. So the information goes into our dispatchers, and about 15 to 20% of our dispatchers are also trained in CIT. So therefore, they know what questions to ask. They know to ask if the individual's been in the military. They know if to ask if the individual's been on medicine or if he's off his medication. They know to ask that what are they suffering from, and how long they've been off their medication. They know to ask what ticks them off, and what calms them down. So, and in turn, the dispatcher feeds the information to the CIT also before he goes to the scene. Therefore, he knows what he or she needs to take to the scene. For instance, I always like to think about there's one in particular, a call where the individual, he's 6'7", about 280 pounds, so he's a big man.
Pretty big guy.
But one thing for sure, one thing about him is that he likes a Snickers bar and a Pepsi. So when the CIT officers go to the scene, when we get that call, the officer is going to stop by the store. He's going to get a Snickers bar and a Pepsi to take to him because it's a peace offering.
Yes.
It's saying that we're trying to build a rapport with you, that we're not there to hurt you. We want to be your friend. We want to help you get the help you need. So that's what's important for the citizens to realize. You have to give us as much information as you can about your loved one, what they're going through and what they're suffering with, so that we know how to react to it when we get there. Things like, are there any weapons present, or is he violent? Has he ever been violent? Those are the kind of things that the officers need to know.
Well, you know, and speaking of dealing with consumers who may have a tendency for violence or what have you, your officers make the scene. And Officer Lash, you've got some mighty fine equipment here on the displayed here. Walk us through a call for service with a person who possibly may need some intervention a little bit differently than talking to. So, Officer Lash, if you would do that.
Well, I'll start with the first item up front. As every officer, we're equipped with body cameras. Next, our CIT officers are also equipped with a conducted electrical weapon, that is the Taser X2. And also they carry the impact delivery system, and this particular model is a Sage SL6, which shoots a rubber baton. Again, it's an impact weapon that is less lethal. So instead of going straight to deadly force, we're able to utilize other tools in the less than lethal aspect.
And this thing looks very scary. That's less than lethal right there?
Yes, sir.
Wow. And you said that's what they call the baton. So that's typically what we would consider to be a bullet, I'm assuming, right?
Right.
Okay. And Colonel, most stations have weaponry to be able to deploy in instances where they may have to meet this type of aggression from that particular call.
Yes, every workstation will have at least 4 of these on hand, 4 of the SL6s on hand. And although it looks intimidating, it's designed to be intimidating. And I'm happy to say that on last year, 2017, we did not have to deploy that weapon one time on an individual.
Not one time?
Not one time, because it is intimidating. So when people look at that, they think, hey, I need to do what it takes so that they don't have to use this on me. And that's one of the purposes of it. Not only so that you don't have to use deadly force, but if you can intimidate an individual by it, I mean, we've already won the game.
That's right. Wow. You've heard it here first, folks. We'll be right back, right here on Best in Blue with our own Colonel Beasley and Officer Lash.
Brought to you by the Memphis Police Department. The best in blue. Visit joinmpd.com.
Memphis 911, do you need police, fire, or ambulance?
This is Memphis Police Director Michael Rollins.
And Fire Director Gina Sweat. Every false alarm call takes minutes away from 911 dispatchers and the police and fire departments.
We can save millions of dollars and help keep police officers, firefighters, and paramedics responding to true emergencies if you help us reduce false alarms.
Learn more about Operation FAR at www.metroalarms.org.
Best in blue for you. Best in blue. Best in blue for you.
Best in Blue, connecting you, the listener, to the everyday inner workings of the Memphis Police Department.
Best in blue. Best in blue for you. Best in blue. Best in blue for you. Best in blue. Best in blue for you.
We're back, and I'm DC, host of Best in Blue here on the KUDZUKIAN Network. And we're visiting with a couple of consummate professionals, is what I'd like to call them, in the likes of Lieutenant Colonel Vincent Beasley and Officer James Lash, who happens to be a coordinator with the Memphis Police Department's Crisis Intervention Team. You know, we've had one heck of a talk today, and I'd like to really get into how our family members, those folks who live with us on a day-to-day basis, they may be going through some type of crises, such as, we don't know if it's alcohol abuse, maybe it's drug addiction or what have you, but not only do you have tools that you can address with with your officers on a daily basis, but how do we get to the point where we can assist our own family members when we call for service on crisis? I mean, is there something I need to tell you about my aunt or my uncle or my sister or my brother when I'm calling 911 for service?
Well, the stigmatism is already associated with those who suffer from mental illness and those who are in crisis.
Yeah.
There's a stigmatism, and we tend to not want to air our dirty laundry. And when that happens, then the officers are handicapped when they make the scene, because as the loved one and the person that knows about this individual, we need for you to give us all the information you can give us about them. We need to know if they've served in the military and if they've suffered from PTSD and what other illnesses they may have, if they're on their medication and the things that tick them off and the things that calm them down. We need to know all of that. So, you know, what we do, and, you know, it's confidential. We're not going to go put your loved one's business out and what their conditions are, but we need to know what's going on so that we can determine how we're going to react and what we need to do.
Well, you know, you've had some calls where the consumers were extremely non-compliant and other interventions had to be deployed. So tell us how many, with relationship to calls and outcomes, were on the negative side as far as the consumer is concerned. I know we've talked a little bit offline before that you all made so many calls, but how many folks actually were transported either to a hospital agency? I mean, or were there any lethal interactions over the last year or so?
So, as I said earlier, we answered 21,311 calls on last year, 2017, and out of those, we actually transported 724 people to a penal facility, which is the rate is astronomically low when you consider the number of calls we made. It equates to somewhere around 0.033% of the calls that we made.
Wow.
The national average is somewhere between 4 and 6 of being transported on mental illness calls. So we did fairly well with that. I'm also proud to say that out of all the calls we answered, there were only 15 calls where somebody had to be transported because of some severe injury or something like that. So we're doing what we should do. We're making sure that the consumers are safe. We're making sure the family members are safe, and we're also making sure that our officers are safe. And we can prove it. The numbers prove it for themselves.
15 is what you're telling me.
Yeah, not 15%. 15.
15 calls.
15. 1, 2, 3, 15.
Wow.
Yes.
You know, Officer Lash, you know, this piece of equipment you have right here, and this is a non-lethal piece of equipment. You say it's non. It looks pretty lethal to me sitting here, but let me see that right. And this is the baton that is, or the projectile that's used with this particular machinery, correct?
Right.
And this is non-lethal. Well, folks, I'm here to tell you, it's non-lethal, but it looks like it hurts a lot. I would assume, and this was not deployed at all on last year, is that correct?
We did not have to use it on last year because of it's intimidating. It looks wicked. And therefore, people tend to look at it and say, hey, you know, I certainly don't want them to use that on me. So they will comply. So when we make the scene, the first thing we talk about is de-escalation. That's what we want to do. We always want to de-escalate the situation. We want to bring it down to the term where everybody's calm so that we can talk. And that's what we do. So we go from officers present to, hey, listening to individuals, because people want to be heard.
Yeah.
Most of the time when an individual's in crisis, they feel like no one is listening to them. No one is hearing what they're saying. So therefore, when we are able to talk to them, and we talk to them, and we listen to them, and then we're able to regurgitate some of the things they've told us. So we're already winning, because at that point they feel like, well, at least they're listening to me.
That's right.
So they really want to help me because they're listening to me, and they can tell me some of the things I've already said.
Wow. You know, are there any referral points that families can call on or can use that will assist them on a day-to-day basis? You know, agencies in Memphis that you know that we have a multitude of calls. You've done 21,000 plus. Are there other agencies that you all refer to here in the Memphis and Shelby County community?
Well, we actually, one of our partners and one of the founders of CIT is the National Alliance on Mentally Ill, NAMI. We always recommend that you call NAMI because they have tons of resources, and they can also give you other places you need to call when you have family members that are suffering. They teach classes, they educate the family members on what they should expect. So NAMI is a great reference for individuals who have people that are in crisis.
Assistant Coordinator Lash, in your work with the department and this particular unit, I'm assuming that you have gone through the ranks and worked in the trenches, so to speak, on making these calls. And have you seen from when it comes from a family perspective, when they make the call, I'm assuming that the family thinks almost the worst first when you all show, right? And then when your officers show up, I'm sure there's some reassurance there, right? Because you've got a CIT trained off who's not necessarily going to come bearing the full brunt of the badge, but probably a listening ear.
Yes, and that's identifiable by our pin that we wear, the CIT pin that's on our uniform. People in the community are able to identify that person has been through the special training, that may be able to communicate or relate better with that person in crisis. And so that's who they look at.
Well, and that's all good. And that's what we want our citizens to know, that our police are there to protect and serve. There's no doubt about that, right? But there's sometimes, Colonel, when you have to have an officer go by, and as you said before, we talked on another segment about the soda and the Snicker bar.
Right.
And so sometimes I'm assuming that it's almost a hand-in-glove kind of deal, where if our family members can work directly with our officers and give them all the information they need, right, then your job is a little bit easier when you make the scene. No doubt, Colonel?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's one of the things that we go out and do. We're not just out there handling calls. Our CIT officers are actually going and giving presentations on what CIT does. We're going to community events, and we're going to homes, and we're talking to people. We're going to schools, because we want everybody to know what CIT does. We don't want it to be a surprise to you when the CIT officer shows up, because we're talking about building partnerships and relationships. And when we can do that, things just work out better for everybody that's involved.
Wow. Colonel Beasley, Officer Lash, thank you for your service. And tell our fine officers out there on the streets, and they're working this unit with you all, stay safe. We support your efforts. Come back to us and see us again here on Best in Blue. We are always glad to be able to sit down and talk to you, Colonel Beasley, because we know how much you like this show. And you know what? You listen to it all the time. If you're not on your podcast, listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn app, Stitcher, iHeartMedia, and other podcast providers, then you need to. You need to. Stick around for Best in Blue right here on the KUDZUKIAN Network. We'll be right back.
Brought to you by the Memphis Police Department. The Best in Blue. Visit joinmpd.com.
Live in Memphis? Need assistance. Finding help is easy when you make the right call. Meet John and his family. They are new to the community, but they need help. Are they making the right call? For life-threatening emergencies only, of course, John would call 911. But not for noise complaints or things like loose dogs, vacant lots with weeds, and garbage collection. That's 311. Call 311 when you don't know where to turn for city services. Call 211 for things like home care support, mental health, employment services, community programs, housing and income supports, and so much more. That's 211. Call 211 when you need non-emergency health and human services help. Whether it's 311, 211, or 911. Finding help is easy when you make the right call.
What you gonna play now? Bobby? I don't know. But whatsoever I play, it's got to be funky. 1, 2, 3.
I think we were getting diddly squat. He was going to give us diddly. We got the diddly part, and I think we're working on the squat right now.
And I'm not saying go back and look at what Barack Obama did. Go back and look at what George Bush did. You had National Security Advisor, African-American woman, Secretary of State, African-American man. That was George Bush.
Are we listening, though? Those of us in the African-American, are we listening to you, though? Do you see anywhere in your data where the numbers are going up in terms of black media? Because we see a lot of our black media partners are selling to some of the major corporations in America. Are we making any headway?
Racism and all the things that exist. But it starts by you galvanizing your strength at home. We have to start to trade with each other in all aspects.
And he said something profound. You just have to keep fighting to get those stories. And eventually, you keep advocating for those stories. Eventually, those stories are going to get told.
Whatever they did it well, sewing and all of those types of service type jobs. They did it with pride. They did it with quality too.
Yeah.
They did it with quality.
Right here on Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. You're going to get your information out of us. It's going to be real, it's going to be right, and it's going to be funky.
Funky politics is on. D.C. and Death Ward on the throne. Politics for the young and old. They won't stop till they reach their goal.
I'm honored to be a part of Funky Politics.
Funky politics for me and you. So sit back and enjoy the show. The KUDZUKIAN Network, let's go.
As host of Best in Blue, I get to talk to Director Mike Rollins and members of his leadership team and a multitude of officers about the work of our department, the Memphis Police Department. I can't think of an agency anywhere in the country that does all the work our MPD does, and they should be applauded for the efforts. You know, our city is filled with a diversity of people of all shapes, colors, and states of being. And as we enjoy what we love about Memphis, let's keep in mind our neighbor could very well be facing a life-changing issue that may place them in crisis. They're not bad or evil. They've just found themselves in a space that only I and you can help by means of encouragement, assistance, and referral if need be. You know, conflict will arise in our city from time to time, but it's good to know that we have a department that's staffed by men and women that look like you and me, who care so much about our health and our well-being. As a vibrant city, we got to have this. So until next time, do something for yourself, your neighbor, and your city. Speak positive vibes, and guess what? We'll be better for it. You know, all of our shows can be accessed via podcast from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn app, Stitcher, iHeartMedia, and most other podcast providers. I'm DC, and this is Best in Blue on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
That is not a trash can.
I hope my dad doesn't fish there.
Storm drains lead to our rivers.
Do you want greater travel flexibility on your bicycle? Then MATA encourages you to bike and ride. All MATA buses are now equipped with bike racks that allow you to load your bike onto the front of the bus and catch a ride to your destination. Bike racks have space for 2 conventional bicycles, including children's bikes. The racks are self-service and easy to use. Trolleys don't have bike racks, but you can always carry your bike on board as long as there's space available. For more information on MATA's bike racks, visit matatransit.com.
When you're running your own business and taking care of your disabled brother, you tend to learn about responsibility pretty quickly.